This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan podcast.
Welcome into another episode of the Phillip Jordan Show podcast. I am Phillip Jordan, in-studio host and producer of Dothan Wolves football on 96.9 The Legend, and also cover the Auburn Tigers with the Auburn Wire over at USA Today. This is going to be a solo pod breaking down SEC Week 9. Used to do these a lot in podcast world and YouTube, and we got 5 weeks left. We are going to do this every week from the remainder of the college football season. Me coming on here giving my thoughts, mostly SEC, but we'll kind of touch on some other stuff going on in college football as well. We got a lot to talk about here on today's show. Brian Kelly fired at LSU. We're going to lead with that, recap the LSU A&M game, but mostly lean into the Brian Kelly part of things with him being fired at LSU on Sunday. We'll also jump into the rest of Week 9. Ole Miss getting a big win, almost a career-defining win for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. First time beating a ranked team on the road. Auburn survives. Hugh Freeze is still the head coach there at Auburn. Texas comes back against Mississippi State. Alabama finds a way, and much, much more on this edition of the Phillip Jordan Show podcast. You check out the Phillip Jordan Show podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater, or possibly an Alabama fan. You can also check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video. And I'll also read that on a future edition as well. You can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. All right, let's get into it. And going into this, because I was thinking about this end of last week, Thursday or Friday, let me do a recap of what happened in the SEC in college football out of Week 9, and I was going to probably go first SEC, which we're just going to go in order of the games, what happened. So that way nobody thinks you're biased toward anybody. But then on Sunday, Brian Kelly gets fired at LSU, and I said, okay, that's where you have to start off, Phillip. You have to start off at LSU and Brian Kelly get fired. This is the third SEC coach this season to get fired in season. Of course, it started off with Sam Pittman, Arkansas. Then we had Billy Napier there at Florida. Now Brian Kelly at LSU. And just looking at college football as a whole, there's been a lot of this already. Of course, we know about James Franklin, Penn State. He got fired a couple weeks ago as well there. So in this new era of college football, this is where we're at. And look, it's a lot of pressure on these teams to make the playoff. That's where everybody wants to go. Would it be expanded in a few years? I hope they just don't go too far. But maybe giving more teams opportunities and more coaches opportunities to keep their job. But this is where we're at now, and it makes more sense. You want to just get ahead of things. So you want to get ahead of the search, letting the coach go during the season versus waiting to the end of the year. And look, we're going to get into it later with Auburn. If Hugh Freeze and Auburn doesn't beat Arkansas, we could have been talking about another coach getting fired on Sunday and Hugh Freeze, but now he survives another week. It's almost like college basketball. As your head coach now, especially one on the hot seat, survive in advance. And that's what he did there. But we're going to look into LSU and Brian Kelly, and this came out, of course, on Sunday night. Multiple people coming out that Brian Kelly is fired. A good friend of mine, Brandon Eisman, go check out his podcast, LSU Breakdown. He talks about this in length, about his thoughts, what's going on with LSU and Brian Kelly being fired and what's next and everything. Go check out his podcast. He's put out a couple in the last 36 to 48 hours. But he messaged me. He said, hey, he thought things where the assistant coaches were asked to leave. And you see Matt Moscona putting stuff out that, there's something being worked on. Ross Ellinger and many other people out there, Pete Thamel at ESPN, that this was kind of where they were going with it. There's discussions being made. And he's out. I mean, after 4 years, he was 34-14 at LSU, 19-10 in the SEC. And I think after the first year at LSU, I think Brian Kelly really brought in a lot of optimism. Really did. Now, initially, I think people looked at the hiring, said he's not a fit. Of course, everybody knows what he did at the basketball game when he first got hired, to fake, I don't even know if you'd call it a Louisianan. accent, but it was not good. It was embarrassing. And kind of the other videos he would do when recruits would sign and stuff like that, just it was kind of weird and just weird. It was just weird to say the least. But they went 10-4, 6-2 in the SEC that first year. Get to the SEC championship game. Of course, they lost to Georgia. Next year, 10-3, 6-2 in the SEC. Finished second in the West. But you also had Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman Trophy and all that stuff. The offense looked good, and everybody's like, if LSU could just fix the defense. Again, last year, offense was really good. Defense was a struggle. They went 9-4 with Garrett Nussmeier coming back, and then he comes back. And you're looking at this team. Okay, they got the quarterback. They went in the portal. They added some receivers. And the thing with LSU with Brian Kelly, people always say, well, they can't run the football. I always question that. I looked at it as I don't think LSU wants to run the football. They don't try to run the football. And that was also an issue. And their defense was good. And coming into this year, playing Clemson opening game, which those two teams are obviously not what we thought they were coming into the year, because that was a big top matchup coming into week 1 of the season. And for LSU, that had been the struggle winning these opening games. They had lost 2 to Florida State. Brian Kelly had. I mean, he struggled against Florida State in openers overall, even at Notre Dame. And then you also had them losing last year against USC in the opener. So then winning the opener. So this is the big thing for LSU. They won that one, but now, of course, Clemson's not what they were. But the offense is just struggling throughout the year. Offensive line issues, and you could tell Garrett Nussmeier had not been right. But coming in, and a lot of people thought this was going to be a team that could win a national championship. This was an SEC contender. This is a team that should be in the college football playoff, just with what they had coming back. And you can see with Blake Baker and his defense, because when he was at Missouri, year 2 is when the defense really took that next step and was really good there with the Tigers. And you thought with this version of the Tigers that he's with LSU, that was going to be the case. And they looked like the case most of the year, but the offense just was not there. And you saw Brian Kelly just getting mad and aggravated with reporters in his post-game press conferences about asking him about the offense. And I think those are just questions. They're just doing their job, and the offense is just not there. Yes, they were still winning games, but you lose to Ole Miss. You lose to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt looked like the more physical team. And you saw that on Saturday night against Texas A&M. That was the more physical team in Texas A&M. Also looking at, they have not agreed on a buyout settlement, according to the last I saw from Matt Moscona, and also Ross Dellinger saying LSU will continue paying Kelly per his contract with buyout resolution to be determined at a later date. So they just want him gone. And the offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan, he's no longer there. So now, what does LSU go? They're in the off week, then they play Alabama. So you're probably looking at your 4th loss there. And can this team get to a 6 win? Do they even want to go to a bowl game with this situation? I think most teams that are in a coaching change, they really don't really want to go to a bowl game. And right now, I think a lot of people, especially in the Power 4 teams, if you're not in the playoff, I think a lot of fan bases have gotten out. They just do not care about what happens with a bowl game. And just looking at Saturday night, LSU was up 18-14 at halftime. That is the wild thing, too, about this. I'm watching the game. I'm like, okay, LSU's made some plays. Now, I will say this. A&M moved the ball up and down the field on them in the first half, but Marcel Reed had the 2 interceptions that did turn into points for LSU. But I really did like what I was seeing out of LSU. There's also a block punt in there that resulted in a safety for LSU. They showed some good things with the running game with Harlan Berry. He was playing really well. I thought we saw Nussmeier throwing the ball down the field. He looked like more of himself than he has most of this season. But then the second half starts, and then A&M gets out of their own way. No block punts, no interceptions, and they scored 35 unanswered points. And it really started off with the opening kickoff for A&M. They get in good field position. They go down the field, score a touchdown. Marcel Reed runs in 21-18. So then you can kind of feel A&M getting that momentum going their way. Then LSU goes 3 and out. They did run with Berry on the first play, but then you have back-to-back pass attempts, and one was a sack with Nussmeier. So it's kind of like LSU, once again, not sticking with that run game that was working so well. And then A&M wide receiver KC Concepcion, runs back a 79-yard punt return for a touchdown. That puts up A&M 28-18. And to me, that's when the game was over. The momentum was clearly on A&M side. They kept panning the camera over to Brian Kelly, but they did not let up. It looked like to me with A&M that they went in the locker room and Mike Elko told his team, look, you are better than LSU. They obviously showed it in the second half. They were more physical. They did not make mistakes. And a lot of those mistakes did kind of keep LSU in the game, and they had the lead. But once they went at 2018, it was over. And then you hear the fire Kelly chants, and the LSU fan base. I mean, A&M took over Baton Rouge. They took over Death Valley. And that's not something that's supposed to happen. I mean, yes, we've seen Brian Kelly last year against Alabama, but this just felt completely different. But I also say this: we pay attention and we focus on the LSU part of this. A&M is really good. They are a really good football team. They're undefeated. They're 8-0. First time since 1992. They are 8-0. And this team is obviously a lot different than they were with Jimbo Fisher. They're living up to what they could be. A&M's always been a program that kind of was a great team waiting to happen. Just if everything could fall in place, get the right guy in there that could really push forward. Marcel Reed, man, he deserves, for anybody that doubts him, he definitely deserves to be mentioned within the Heisman candidates of college football. Big game for him. 200 yards. He had 2 passing touchdowns, 108 on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns there as well. He had the opening touchdown to start the game for Texas A&M. So looking at them, I don't see them getting beat rest of the way. And for anybody brings it up, anybody listened to the show last week, I did pick LSU to win this game. Look, at halftime, I was feeling pretty good about it too when they were up 18-14. Looking at A&M, what they have rest of the way. At Missouri, they're off this week. Then they're at Missouri. We've got 5 weeks left in the regular season. Off this week. On the 8th, they're at Missouri. And now with Missouri, we'll talk about them in Vanderbilt later on in the show. But with the injury to Bo Prabula, I really don't feel like Missouri is going to have a shot in that one. That just really is going to be something that hurts that team going forward. Even though I feel like they still played well against Vanderbilt after that injury. But now, moving forward, how's that team going to look? Then you play South Carolina at home. Then you're playing Samford, and then you're at Texas. And look, Texas, they keep finding ways to win in overtime, but they definitely are not the same team as A&M. And that'll be the day after Thanksgiving. And, of course, A&M, they lost that game to Texas last year. But right now, A&M, to me right now, it looks like Texas A&M and Alabama are the front runners in the SEC. But you also got Ole Miss, and then you also got Georgia behind them as well. So, and those teams are going to be hoping for some losses because Alabama's yet to lose in the SEC, and then also A&M is yet to lose in the SEC as well. Now, before I jump into the next game we're going to talk about, which will be the Oklahoma-Ole Miss game, the candidates. That's the first thing that happens, the hot boards. Who does people think are the top candidates for this job and for the LSU job? And looking at Lane Kiffin comes out first. And, I remember, I feel like a few years ago, his name was kind of getting floating around for LSU, but I think that's, obviously when Brian Kelly was hired. So Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin at the very top of the list. He's also top of the list of Florida. So Lane Kiffin's going to be on the top of many teams' list. Of course, I cover Team Auburn that tried to get him as well a few years ago. So I'm just going to say I think he likes being there at Ole Miss. So I don't think it's necessarily as easy as you think to pull him away from Oxford. Then you got Tulane head coach John Sumrall, which he's also been attached to if the Auburn job comes open, which we say if, but I feel like that it will be a job that's open at the end of the year, just not yet because Hugh Freeze got to win on Saturday. Of course, right now with him coaching at Tulane, he's in the state. That would be a name to look out for. Some people put Marcus Freeman. That would be funny if they grabbed 2 Notre Dame coaches back to back. Brett Key at Georgia Tech is doing a great job. They're undefeated. I don't feel like Georgia Tech is getting talked about enough as they should. So that's another name that's being flown out there as well. And then you have Eli Drakewitz there at Missouri. I feel like Drakewitz is going to eventually leave Missouri just because I believe there's a ceiling at Missouri. I'm sorry if you like Missouri and you're listening to this show and I just offended you. I don't think you can win a national championship at Missouri. I think you can win 9-10 games, maybe sneak into the playoff, but I think that's your ceiling. I do. I believe that is your ceiling at Missouri. I just don't think you can go beyond that. Obviously, at LSU, you can. And that's why Brian Kelly, the whole deal was when he got the job coming from Notre Dame, it's like, okay, he could not win a national championship at Notre Dame because at that time, people were saying, well, you can't get the players necessary. And I always, at the time, and I said this, that you couldn't get the skill position players at wide receiver to win a national championship at Notre Dame. Well, Marcus Freeman proved that wrong last year. They got to the national championship game, just no one was beating that Ohio State team the way they were playing in the postseason. So that's how I feel with Missouri. I don't think you can win a national championship there. You can win one at LSU. We know that. So that's going to be the thing. It's going to be interesting. Of course, we got 5 weeks left in the regular season, so you're going to hear all kind of rumors for Penn State, Florida, a little bit of Arkansas, not to this level. That's not a top. That's not a top job. It's an SEC job. It's not a top job. And then now LSU. Let's see if Auburn opens up. That's going to be another one in the SEC that will be quite interesting. So a lot to keep up with this LSU A&M game. I've gone over 15 minutes just talking about this. So this took up a big chunk of the show, but such a big news story. Now let's look into Ole Miss and Oklahoma. All right, now so jumping over to Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Ole Miss winning 34-26 in this one. And now this was another one. Look, I took some chances on my picks last week. The big 3 SEC games, I picked the underdog. And I got all 3 wrong. Things that happen, you try to take chances with these picks, and it kind of tend to be the case. Ole Miss and Oklahoma. I picked Oklahoma to win just because I look, okay, Oklahoma's good enough offensively. We saw Ole Miss kind of wear out or fall apart toward the end of the Georgia game. And I like the Oklahoma defense going into best defense in the SEC, I think, just from watching them play. But Ole Miss, look, a lot of grit for this team. They did not waver. They got down 26-25 there in the third quarter. And unlike last week, I feel like last week when Georgia took the lead, took that momentum, Ole Miss couldn't recover. And they didn't. But this week they did. They got down 26-25, and then they battled back to retake the lead. And just a tremendous win. And this was the first win for Lane Kiffin as the head coach at Ole Miss against on the road against a ranked opponent. They had not done that yet there. And they come out in the fourth quarter. Trace Buckler with an 8-yard pass from Trinidad Chambliss. Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, this is a name to this player. I mean, I have been so impressed by what he's done this year. We come in this year, everybody think, okay, Austin Simmons, we saw what he did when he had to come in for Jackson Dart last year in a game against Georgia. This is a guy, and you got to really feel like when you look at any team that's coached by Lane Kiffin, quarterback play is never going to be an issue. It's not. And you just feel like Austin Simmons coming in, he should be all right. Trinidad Chambliss, 315 yards, 1 touchdown, the first team to throw for over 300 yards against this Oklahoma defense this year. And for Ole Miss to hold this team, and then scored 9 points there in the fourth quarter, held off Oklahoma. Oklahoma could not come back and win the game. And for Ole Miss, I just look at this team, what they have. I mean, who's going to beat them on the remainder of their schedule? I think this is a team we're going to see in the college football playoff. And this is a team I think coming into the year we did not really talk about with Ole Miss. We really didn't. They have South Carolina this week, and then they have the Citadel on the 8th. They have Florida coming up, and then they also have Mississippi State. I don't see them losing any of these games. I don't. They finally are going to get a home game at home at night this week, which I know Lane Kiffin has talked about a lot. You're going to beat the Citadel. Then you got an off weekend here, and then you, like I said, you got Florida, and then you've got at Mississippi State to close out the year. And poor Mississippi State, they're always in these close games. And also Ole Miss is off the week before that day after Thanksgiving game in the Egg Bowl. And, for Oklahoma, I really look at them. This is a team that got in the top 10 this year. All the excitement around John Mateer. And, he was fine in this game, 17-31, 223, 1 touchdown. They did get somewhat a running game going, which they had a long 65-yard run by Xavier Robinson, 109 yards. That's always kind of been a deal with me with Oklahoma this year is the run game. Outside of their quarterback runs with John Mateer, Isaiah Satega, 131 yards, a touchdown. He was good. The offense was fine for Oklahoma. But, again, what Ole Miss did offensively, and they just have so many weapons on the outside. You have Winston Watkins. You have Harrison Wallace. You have Caden Lee. Kewan Lacey is a player in the backfield you have to worry about. They've got so many weapons on this offense, too. You just can't pinpoint one spot. And then, of course, you got Phillip Jordan, the quarterback. He's a guy that, he's a guy that And when I look at Oklahoma for the rest of the way, kind of got to worry about them. They are sitting now at 6-2, 2-2, and it just feel like this was an elimination game coming in. So I think Oklahoma is pretty much eliminated from any college football playoff consideration. Unless, I mean, they could win all the rest of them, and maybe so. They're at Tennessee this week. They got to go to Alabama. They play Missouri, and they play LSU. Now, I think they probably could win those last two. Those last two may be winnable, especially we just don't know, again, like I said earlier, how Missouri is going to look now at quarterback. Basically playing your third-string quarterback now. But I don't think they're going to win at Tennessee. Now, that's going to be a high-scoring game because Tennessee cannot stop anybody. I mean, they made Kentucky look like a reasonably good offense this week. And Alabama, I don't think it'll be Alabama. They're going to remember what happened last year. Alabama's going to get them there. So I'm looking at Oklahoma. They're going to have 4 losses. Maybe you can beat Missouri, and you should beat LSU. That's going to be the last game of the year for LSU. We'll see the pride and how much the players just want to end their year with a good game, but you should beat the LSU at the end there. So if Missouri's not careful, they could end 7-5. And if you end this year 7-5, if you're Oklahoma, I think then that's when some questions are going to be answered about Brent Venables. Is he the guy? Because last year they weren't great either. And you have another average, subpar year, mediocre year for Oklahoma standards. Will they start looking in another direction? I'm not saying he's on the hot seat now because there's so many guys, so many jobs going to be open. I don't think this would be the time for Oklahoma to get in the search for a new head coach. But next year, I really feel like Venables is going to really, really be on the hot seat going in. If they end the year 7-5 like that, like I think they could. Like I think they could lose to Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri. The Missouri game is probably going to be a toss-up. But then they should beat LSU at the end. But 7-5, that's not going to do it for Oklahoma fans. They expect to compete for the college football playoff and to compete for a national championship. All right, also in the early window games was Auburn at Arkansas, with Auburn winning 33-24 to get to 4-4 on the season. You know, obviously we kick off this show talking about Brian Kelly being fired at LSU. This was another one that if Auburn lost this game and the way it was looking, that looked like a possibility that Hugh Freeze might get fired. Because I think, are they waiting till the off week after Vanderbilt? But you lose to an Arkansas team that's looked really good offensively, and they were going to be dangerous for Auburn going to Arkansas, early kickoff, that offense, Bob Petrino, all that. That was a dangerous game for Auburn. Auburn losing 4 games in a row. Where's the confidence at? Where's the mindset of the team? So you would have to think Auburn dropped this one, dropped to 3-5 on the year. Then you could throw a bowl game out the window too, even going 6-6. I think Hugh Freeze would get fired, but Auburn was able to find a way. 33-24. And as has been the case for the last few weeks with Auburn, I say Oklahoma A&M, the offense started out bad. Against Georgia and Missouri, they played well early. In Missouri game, there were some signs in the second half. They played okay with Jackson Arnold, quarterback. And that was the case here with Auburn. But a lot of it, even in the second half when things were going a little bit better offensively, and then the first half, it was all about Jeremiah Cobb. Jeremiah Cobb had his best game of the season. And this is a player that this team should ride. But Hugh Freeze does want to throw the football. And that's, if you're an Auburn fan and that's somebody that covers them, it's aggravating because you see what you have with this running game with Jeremiah Cobb. That's what all Auburn people watching this team, covering this team, thought this team could be this year with a quarterback with running ability like a Jackson Arnold and running backs at the time like Jeremiah Cobb and Damari Alston, Darrell Robinson, Omar Mapson, what this team can be. Obviously, have not seen Darrell Robinson because of an injury, and Damari Alston is not there because he is no longer with the team. But Jeremiah Cobb, 153 yards in the game, and he played great. And Auburn fed him the ball early, let the offense run through him. They go at 10-0 early. Had that great catch by Cam Coleman in the end zone. One-handed catch, DB draped all over him, but still tremendous catch, reminding you how great Cam Coleman is and will continue to be as long as he plays college football. But obviously, too, he gets hurt in the game, ankle deal. We'll see how that goes throughout the week. And then he did come back, which was great for him. Didn't make a catch, but obviously, if he's on the field, defense has to pay attention to him. They're up 10-0, and then the offense starts to sputter. Arkansas goes up 14-10. So But then Auburn toward the end of the first half, moving the ball. Once again, Jeremiah Cobb is carrying the team down the field with his running ability. And the drive before that, Auburn tried to throw it 3 straight times. Despite the success of the running game, Hugh Freeze sometimes just cannot, not sometimes, a lot of times, cannot get out of his own way. Throw the ball 3 times, 2 incompletions and a sack. Arkansas gets the ball back. They go up 14-10. And then you're driving with the run game. And you look like you're going to take the lead 17-14 going into halftime. Everything's looking good for Auburn. And then they go RPO. And Jackson Arnold obviously makes the wrong read. It should have been a run either by him or the running back. Interception. Pick 6 for the Razorbacks. And they take a 21-10 lead going into the locker room. Now, the last minute of the half, when Auburn got the ball after that pick 6, they went to Ashton Daniels. And I just knew. When he threw that pick 6, I said, Hugh Freeze, this is the moment. You have to bench Jackson Arnold, and you have to go to Ashton Daniels. And even in the few plays we saw Ashton Daniels, look, it didn't result in points or anything substantial with Auburn in that final minute of him out there. But you saw a more confident quarterback for Auburn in those plays. So going to the second half, and he led the team. And look, he did not do anything spectacular. Ashton Daniels was 6 of 8, 77 yards, no interceptions, and it just felt like the offense was being run more properly with him. You had a quarterback out there that seemed like he had confidence. Look, Ashton Daniels is more experienced in college football. Remember, he played 2 years for Stanford. I know Stanford wasn't good, but he's played college football at a high level. And it's just with Jackson Arnold, just decision-making, just not there. And that was the wrong decision to make. And then the fourth quarter, the defense has been great all year. I mean, Xavier Atkins, perhaps his best game of the year, with 13 tackles and 2 sacks and 4 TFLs. But then also the Auburn defense making plays with the interceptions. And I know a lot of people say, well, it was handed to the plays, the interceptions, or performance. You still got to go out and make the play. And then Rashad Pleasant cutting off the receiver, undercutting when Auburn was down 24-19, taking it to the house, goes up 25-24, then Auburn gets the 2-point conversion with Ashton Daniels running in. All the momentum now is Auburn's side of things. You pick up a fumble recovery by Sylvester Smith, another Rashad Pleasant interception, and then they close it out with Kinsley Falston to ice it with his interception. So they're making the plays. And also, let's give it out to Alex McPherson in this one. 6 of 6 on field goals, missed 3. Dave Portnoy, that idiot over there at Barstool Sports. Look, I'm a big Ryan Russillo fan. He's over there now. I will listen to Ryan. Dave Portnoy does not need to be talking about a lot of stuff in sports. He just does not know what he is talking about. But great for McPherson kicking the field goals and everything. His long of the day. And, it's been a while since he's made the super long kicks, but he made a 47-yard field goal. Seems like he's getting that strength back with him. And what this game does is it secures or saves Hugh Freeze for another week. Auburn is playing Kentucky this Saturday night at home, which I think is a game they should win. Auburn should get to 5-4. Of course, you go to Vanderbilt. You're off. You have Mercer, and then you have Alabama. So at least you're looking at Auburn. You should get to 6 wins. You should. Going to Vanderbilt is going to be tough, and Vanderbilt is a much better football team than Auburn. So I'm not going to sit here saying they ain't, because they are. They are a much better football team than Auburn. We're going to get to Vanderbilt in the next game we're going to talk about. But at least right now for Hugh Freeze, that kind of keeps him safe at Auburn. I still think at the end of the year there's going to be a change there. I don't think they beat Alabama at the end of the year. We used to sit out Toby all the time. He'd save his job all the time because he just would upset or beat Alabama. But I just do not see him being the coach next year. Personally, I would love to see John Sumrall as the next head coach at Auburn, but we shall see how that goes. And kind of interesting, and it's been talked about online and on some YouTube shows and stuff like that. So a lot of this year, when Ashton Daniels' name has been brought up to Hugh Freeze was all big about preserving his red shirt, which if you don't play more than 4 games, you can still keep your red shirt. So he would have eligibility for next year. Well, he played this past Saturday, and Auburn's got 4 more games, as I said. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Mercer, and then you've got Alabama. If he plays all 4 of those games, that's 5 games he's played in, then boom, that's gone. There will be no red shirt for Ashton Daniels. So what does Auburn do? I feel like we're not going to see him against Mercer. You either play Jackson Arnold or do not. that's the situation. Because, hey, Jackson, we don't have a future for you here, but will you go play in that game? Or Deuce Knight, what's his deal? And especially going to be a coaching change with you and what his deal. That's going to be the interesting part with there. And I'll say from Arkansas side of things, they had chances in this game. Auburn's defense played well and held them to some field goals when they had to. Still Auburn with that bend but not break defense. I think obviously it's also showing Bob Petrino's not going to be the head coach for this team. I'll be very surprised if that happens. There's been some push for that for him to be the full-time head coach after this to get the interim tag put off. I think there's a lot of people just looking at what he was before the motorcycle deal and everything before. But I think they need a young, new voice there at Arkansas. So I think this game also kind of put that to bed a little bit, though, that Bob Petrino is not going to be the full-time head coach for the Arkansas Razorbacks. All right, jump into what was going into today, the game of the day. Game day was there in Nashville for Missouri and Vanderbilt. Still something I would not have said going into this season. I would have thought this would be a game day. Was that? I thought both teams would be solid, but not to this level. Missouri coming in number 15, Vanderbilt number 10. Once again, kind of like the Oklahoma and Ole Miss game. It kind of felt like this may be an eliminator game when it comes to the college football playoff race, coming up from this last month of the season. Of course, Vanderbilt wins 17-10, 3-3 at halftime. I think both teams moved the ball a little bit there, had opportunities, but it was a fast-moving half, just teams controlling the ball. And this game went to halftime pretty quick. There's other games still going on to start at the same time. You thought, whoa, this game is moving very fast. I believe this game really turned because Missouri had two opportunities there in the third quarter to put some points on the board and really take advantage and take control of the game. And it started with the Bo Pribula being stopped at the 1 yard line. 4th and goal, 11-17 in the third quarter. He stopped at the 1. And then also the game turned because of an injury. He got bent backwards. He got hurt. Hope for recovery. He's going to be out for a good bit. I hope to see what he's able to do next season. But they stop him there at the 1. So that's been an opportunity where Missouri could have taken some momentum, go at 10-3. I picked Missouri to win this game too. This was of the three, the games that the big games in the SEC this weekend that I picked the underdog and see where it got me on this week. But also you had another missed field goal by Missouri, went off the upright. So there was two chances there. You score touchdowns there, or you score a touchdown in a field goal, you're up 13-3. And you're probably the way the game was going, you would feel like Missouri would have been in control there. Now, I will say coming in for Bo Pribula at quarterback, played really, really well. Matt Zollers, he was 14-23, 138, and he threw a touchdown pass. And I thought he played really well. He held himself pretty well in the game coming in. And was really, look at it, he's really a third-string quarterback. Pribula, the other backup, he's out hurt. Now you're bringing Zollers coming in. And another Ahmad Hardy, 20 attempts in this one from Missouri, 97 yards. So 3 straight weeks he has not hit 100 yards rushing after he was the SEC leading rusher against Alabama, Auburn, and now Vanderbilt. As the competition got better, people zeroing on him, and especially when Pribula gets knocked out of the game like that, you're going to be concentrating there on him. I will say this about Vanderbilt, and the best start in more than 80 years for this program, 3 wins versus AP top 25, first time ever for Vanderbilt. Because obviously, and this has been said, I'm not saying anything new to anybody, hasn't heard on all these different shows that talk about college football. This is not your old Vanderbilt, obviously. And look, and Pavia didn't play great. This was not a great offensive performance by Vanderbilt by any stretch of the imagination. Total yards, they only had 265, 129 through the air, and they had 136 rushing. They had 8 penalties in the game that hurt them. They did have some turnovers. Missouri actually dominated time of possession in this one for 36-12. But for Vanderbilt, they just found a way to win. There was not their best game played, and they found a way. Of course, people probably will bring up the fact that they did go up against a backup quarterback, but still at the end of the day, they picked up the victory. You had MK Young with that 80-yard touchdown to put them at 10-3 with 3:51 there in the third. But then, of course, the touchdown pass from Zollers to Jude James to tie in, to tie up at 10-10 with 12:45 left there in the fourth quarter. And then the setup the drive that would lead Vanderbilt to victory here. C.J. Hurd busted up the middle. Basically, it did not strip the ball. He took the ball away from Jamal Roberts of Missouri, and with 7:02 left, and they went down the field. They scored a touchdown, 1-yard run by Diego Pavia on a 9-play, 44-yard drive worth 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Go 17-10. And Missouri had a chance with the ball at midfield, threw up a Hail Mary. Zollers threw a pass. Kevin Coleman caught it at the 1-yard line. So he caught it, but he did not get in. They had to review and all that stuff. So with Missouri, this is their second loss of the season. Kind of has a theme we've been doing here on the show today. Let's look at what they have got coming up on the schedule. They're playing Texas A&M. They're off this week. They play Texas A&M. They play Mississippi State. They play Oklahoma and Arkansas. A&M is going to be a tough one for them. That'll be an ABC game on the 8th. And then when we flip the roll over and let's look at what Vanderbilt has coming up, and this puts them in a good position, a very good position to be in the playoffs. So this week they will play Texas. We're going to get into Texas just a little bit, but they could be without Arch Manning. We'll keep an update on that. They play at home against Auburn. They play Kentucky and at Tennessee. So at Tennessee at the end of the regular season could be a big game that for both of those teams for a chance at getting into the college football playoff. All right, as we continue on looking at Week 9 in the SEC, now we look at Alabama to South Carolina, 29-22 to improve to 7-1 and 5-0 in SEC play as Alabama goes into the off week. As of course, we know Alabama has really been going through a stretch of games here where they've been playing ranked opponents that started on the 27th of September with Georgia, followed by Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Tennessee. And South Carolina was not easy for them. This really had the potential to be a trap game for Alabama. And honestly, South Carolina outplayed Alabama. On the road, Alabama did not play great in this game. It looked like a team that really needed that off week, and they're glad to have it. And then they'll be playing LSU next. So might as well say I had 2 off weeks. Just kidding, LSU fans, just kidding. But there were some missed chances for South Carolina in the first half of this when they had the interception that was returned for a touchdown. The receiver should have caught the ball. It was just a simple check down. It's not something that was going to turn out something big for South Carolina, but then Alabama picks it off, goes in for the score there in the first half. And then you had a holding penalty that negated a touchdown by Sellers. You had a missed field goal. So there were opportunities in this game. And when you're playing a team like Alabama, you have got to take advantage of those opportunities. And I do not think South Carolina did that. Of course, they fired offensive line coach. I think the offensive line played pretty much better for South Carolina. Had some penalties there, but did not give up too many sacks. Didn't give up too much pressures to Lenore Sellers in this one. And then Alabama was up 14-6 at halftime. Alabama was struggling running the ball in this game, and they had some drops. Ryan Williams, again, had a big drop in this one. Jeremy Bernard had one, too, as well, going down the field. So Alabama, it shows some issues here. And they're not a perfect team. Are they the best team in the SEC right now? I would give A&M that nod. I would. And then I'll probably follow that up with Alabama. But you got to give Alabama credit. That championship DNA. Jeremy Bernard, 2 touchdowns in the final minutes of the game. 14-play, 79-yard drive to tie the game up with the 2-point conversion where Alabama got very creative with that one. Almost looked like a spinoff of the Philly special a little bit. You know, so everybody saw the play. But being able to, you played that poorly. You don't play your best game. Alabama probably brought their C+ or maybe a B- game. Alabama did not bring their A game on Saturday, but we're still able to come out with a win. Clutch plays, and then Deontay Lawson, the fumble recovery on the hit on the North Sellers with 1:39 left to lead them to the Jeremy Bernard score the lead for a touchdown, about 30 seconds left. And I think it was a great decision by South Carolina just letting him score to give yourself some shot, because Bernard just drops. Alabama kicks the field goal, wins this thing 25-22. South Carolina never has a shot at getting the ball back. But that's not what happened. And then South Carolina still didn't. Obviously, everybody knows the final. South Carolina wins. But I was had no problem there. But Alabama going to the off week. Got to get the running game going once again. Only 72 yards rushing in the game. And what they have coming up after the off week, they play at home against LSU, Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois, and at Auburn. You should beat LSU. I think they're going to get some revenge on Oklahoma. Obviously, Eastern Illinois is going to be a game for them. That Auburn game is going to be interesting because Auburn at home in this game, especially if Hugh Freeze is still the coach, all bets are off. We don't know when that game is going to be. It's either going to be a 2:30, it's going to be a night game. We know that for sure with the Iron Bowl. And Auburn has played well against everybody. And if they get a little confidence going in with Ashton Daniels at quarterback, if that's the guy it's going to be, because I didn't mention this during the Auburn part of it, but there's going to be a competition with it too. Hugh Freeze does not want to actually officially name Ashton Daniels start quarterback. He needs to do that. But anyways, this is the Alabama segment of the show. So Alabama has that coming up. Now looking at South Carolina, what's up next for them moving forward? Look, they are at 3-5, and they need 3 more wins to become bowl eligible. They play Ole Miss and Texas A&M in the next 2 weeks, so they're going to have to upset one of those 2 teams to become bowl eligible. Then you play Coastal Carolina. Then you would play Clemson, who is also they're struggling this year as well. So Alabama picks up the win, goes into the off week. They can work on some things as they get ready before they play LSU after they return from that off week. All right, it was another week, another overtime game with the Texas Longhorns, where they won 45-38 against Mississippi State to improve the 6-2, 3-1 in conference, and Mississippi State drops to 4-4-0-4. And for Texas, I guess the thing with them, we just have to give them some credit, figure out ways to win. Now, these are teams with their talent, they should be beating easily. Mississippi State's better. I mean, Kentucky's bad. Kentucky's probably the worst team in the SEC. You should not be going to overtime with these guys. You are better than them. It just gets me. And a lot of people want to point at Arch and his struggles and all that. It's not just him. The defense does not play good against Mississippi State. Not at all. They gave up the most yardage they have given up all season in this game by giving up 445 yards of total yards to Mississippi State. Mississippi State had 382 yards. Blake Shapen had his best game. And also, they did give up a few big plays rushing, only 63 yards rushing, so not horrible, but there were still too many big plays in the passing game. They were averaging 8.9 yards per pass, Mississippi State, in this game. But Texas was able to come back because, one, I will say this, the defense struggled, but they stepped up at the end of the game when they had to in this one. 16-game losing streak in the SEC for Mississippi State. Look, they had that great moment earlier in the year where they beat Arizona State, and they've been there close in some of these games. I mean, they lost to Tennessee close. Obviously, they lose this game close. There's been so many times for Mississippi State this season where they just cannot close out the game. And that's what the difference is. I mean, Auburn's been having this problem. That's the difference between good team and bad team, not being able to close out game. Look, you lose 41-34 to Tennessee. You lose 23-21 to Florida. You should have beat Florida. You were in field goal range. You don't throw the interception to the defensive end who catches the ball. I mean, it just pretty much got stuck to his hands. You win that one. You should have won that game. So there's several games here for Mississippi State they should have won. But for Texas, you find a way to win. So credit has to be given there. They were down in this game 31-14. It was 38-21 with 12:29 left in regulation. Texas came back. Arch Manning led the comeback over on the game, 29-46, 346, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He did have 1 rushing touchdown. But this is also a very important thing I want to say. If you're in a team in the SEC or anywhere, do not punt the ball to Ryan Niblett. 79-yard punt return touchdown to tie the game at 38 when 147 left. I talk about Blake Shapen. He was 26-42 for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was sacked 7 times in the game, 4 times in the final 5 minutes and in overtime. Of course, we're talking about Arch Manning. He did not finish the game. He came out of the game, apparently, concussion protocol now. He did not practice on Monday, so we'll see if he will play against Vanderbilt on Saturday. Matthew Caldwell came in and connected with Emmett Mosley. Now, Matthew Caldwell, he was at Troy last year, transferred in to Texas, pretty much for his final year of eligibility. And I'll say this, if he has to start, this was Matthew Caldwell. Last year at Troy, he threw for 1,608 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Troy pretty much had musical chairs for quarterback last year because Goose Crowder got hurt, and Tucker Gilchrist was not effective. Then Matthew Caldwell did take over later on in the year. And he played better as the year went on. Early in the year, he had some interception issues, but he got better as the year went on. Some of his better performances, they did come at a loss. Against Arkansas State, he threw for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, but threw 3 interceptions in that one. Against Lafayette, in a 30-51 loss. He had 230 yards, 4 touchdowns. Now, he did win Sunbelt Player of the Week when they beat Georgia Southern last year, 28-20, when he was 26-32, 288, 2 touchdowns. I know that's Sunbelt football, or a lot of people say, but he has shown that he can play well, and he made the throw there. Kind of close there, I would say this. Kind of wasn't too sure that was a touchdown or not, but they did rule it a touchdown after replay, and Texas gets the win. But I think Texas is about to hit a wall. They're 6-2 right now. They're number 20 in the country. They play Vanderbilt this week, 11 o'clock on ABC. Then you've got Georgia, Arkansas, A&M. I think they're losing 3 out of the 4, especially if they don't have Arch in these games, or so everybody's jumping on Arch is not good. We'll see how much they'll miss them this week when they play Vanderbilt. But Arkansas, they could probably beat, but I don't see them beating Vanderbilt, Georgia, or Texas A&M. So I'm looking at this team as a 75 team when it closes out. Now, there was also other news around Texas on Saturday, and that was Arch going to the NFL. And he shot down that report. It was reported by Diana Rossini from The Athletic. It came out on Saturday morning, and even his agency, CAA, Jimmy Sexton, came out with a statement, and just something you don't ever see. And it's a statement from representatives for Coach Steve Sarkisian. Any reports regarding communication on coaching opportunities with NFL teams are patently false and wildly inaccurate. Sark is solely focused on coaching the University of Texas football team. Say he could be looking at West. This season just not going well. I don't see him leaving as long as Arch is still the quarterback at Texas. And we know because of the way this year's gone, Arch will be back next year. He will be playing college football next year. So I just do not see that as something that will happen. Who knows? We will wait and see. But I don't foresee Sark leaving and taking an NFL opportunity. But remember, he did serve as the Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator before he went to Alabama to be the offensive coordinator there. He spent 2 years, I believe, with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, he did respond to it. He was asked about it in the post-game press conference on Saturday. And I'm going to play some audio courtesy of the College Football on Fox YouTube channel.
Report that they come out this morning about the NFL. Do you have interest in the NFL?
Yeah, I'd love to touch on this. So bear with me for a second, because it really pisses me off that one person can make a report that in turn the entire media sports world runs with as factual, to the point of my agency and my agents have to put a statement out that they never have done. Historically, CAA, Jimmy Sexton, and Ed Manowitz have never do that. But I had to do that to protect my locker room and my team. And I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. I thought it was completely unprofessional of that person to put that report out. And the fact that everybody ran with it is borderline embarrassing for the media. And I respect what you guys do. I really do. And everybody else. But the fact that everybody ran that as truth is really embarrassing. Okay, so I've got a small circle when I make decisions on what I do and what I don't do, and nobody would speak on my behalf without me knowing. And so where that report came from, I'd love to talk to that person because it's absolutely ridiculous.
All right, and now finally, the final game. We've almost gone an hour on this podcast. I really didn't have an expectation on how long this would go. But anyways, Tennessee defeats Kentucky 56-34. I really won't spend a lot of time on this one. Tennessee took care of business. They put up the points like you kind of expect them to. Joey Aguilar had 396 yards passing. He was 20 of 26, 3 touchdowns. Chris Brazzell, second, had a big day, 138, 4 catch, 1 touchdowns. And as always, Tennessee made the other team look good offensively. Kentucky had 330 yards passing in this game. 146 on the ground. Boley, their quarterback, was 26-35, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. So, Tennessee take care of business there. Tennessee still trying to stay in a playoff hunt, and Kentucky, they are the worst team, without a doubt, in the SEC. And just looking at the SEC standings as we sit here going into Week 10, I tell you, the season has just flown by. Texas A&M and Alabama are the only 2 teams remaining that are undefeated in conference. And honestly, I just don't see either one of those teams losing rest of the way. I mean, it's college football. Who knows what's going to happen? We could see upsets. I just don't see it. I just don't see Georgia or Ole Miss getting, or I mean, I guess Vanderbilt or Texas. I mean, Texas is going to get beat this week anyways, but I just do not see the door opening for them teams to get in there because, again, A&M, looking at their schedule rest of the way, Missouri, South Carolina, Stanford, and Texas. I think they win all those. And then when you flip it around, Alabama, they have LSU, Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois, and then Auburn. I think that Iron Bowl will be competitive. I think it'll be a fun game. I think Texas and Texas A&M will have moments. I think A&M is just better than them, and I think they'll pull away. Kind of same thing Alabama will probably do against Auburn. So I just don't see those two teams losing. And then you got Georgia, who's coming off the off week. They will be playing Florida this week. Their remaining schedule looks like they have Florida, Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, Georgia Tech. That Georgia Tech game is going to be a lot of fun. Georgia Tech undefeated right now. That's going to be a game. And then Ole Miss, I don't really see them losing the rest of the way either. South Carolina to Citadel, Florida, and then you play at Mississippi State. And Vanderbilt and Tennessee could be playing for a playoff spot. So right now, if I had to look, teams in the SEC that I believe will be in the college football playoff, I think Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia will be there. I think Ole Miss will be there as well. And then I think if there was going to be a fifth SEC team to get in, which I don't necessarily think there will be, it's going to be Vanderbilt or Tennessee, in my opinion. That game between them two at the end of the season very well could be what determines how that looks. Looking at the AP Top 25 now, you got Ohio State staying at number 1, Indiana 2, A&M at 3, Alabama 4, Georgia 5, Oregon 6, Ole Miss 7, Georgia Tech actually dropped, but they're at 8. Vanderbilt goes up to 9. BYU's at 10. Along with Miami, they're kind of tied in that spot. Then you have Notre Dame at 12. Notre Dame's getting in. I'm telling you, if they're 10-2, Notre Dame's getting in the playoff. They probably should, but they're getting in. They're getting in without a doubt. So how many SEC teams are in the top 12 of this, which is not the college football playoff? I know. You got A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt. You got this 5. But you got the group of 5 thing coming in. So I just don't see it. And you have Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon out of the Big Ten. And then right now, Georgia Tech. I mean, the ACC's wild. And then who's going to win the Big 12 and all this. So it's a lot to figure out these last 5 weeks. But just looking at it from that standpoint. Let's look at this weekend in the SEC. Go ahead and knock that out. Some picks. So at 11 o'clock ABC, we got number 9 Vanderbilt versus number 20 Texas. Look, the fact is that Arch didn't practice on Monday. I don't think he's going to play. Be surprised if he plays. He may, but I'll be surprised. And even going into that, I would not pick Texas over Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt wins this game. I think now Texas is a 1.5 point favorite going into this. That's trick on them. People still not respecting Vanderbilt. And that probably will change by the time we get there. But I just do not see, again, Texas doing it. I just don't think there'll be a put up offense. And Vanderbilt will not make the same mistakes that Kentucky and Mississippi State made. And then looking at, I'll call it, I don't care if it's not supposed to be called this anymore, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I can't even say it. Maybe that's why they don't want to say it. Number 5, Georgia, 6-1, playing Florida. Of course, no more Billy Napier. Georgia will take care of business here. They will. I just kind of wonder how Florida's going to be. First, taking the field without Billy Napier. That's going to be how are they? How engaged is that team? That'll tell us a lot. Mississippi State and Arkansas, both teams are 0-4 in the SEC. I'm going to pick Mississippi State to win this one. It's going to be a shootout. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. The over-under in this game is 67.5. I'm almost wanting to go over. Arkansas, they're the favorite at 4.5, but I'm going to go Mississippi State there. South Carolina and Ole Miss. Ole Miss wins one here. They finally get a night game at home, which is something Lane Kiffin's been asking for. Ole Miss is a 13.5 point favorite. I think South Carolina had a shot. I think South Carolina loses this one. Oklahoma playing Tennessee. Both teams are 6-2. If Oklahoma wants an outside shot at getting to the playoff, they have to win this game. It's great defense versus great offense. It's in Knoxville. I thought going in last week that because of the great defense versus really good offense would be Oklahoma. But then when you kind of start looking at it, how many good offenses has Oklahoma actually seen? They saw a good offense at Ole Miss. They're seeing a better one this week in Tennessee. Give me Tennessee in this one. They're a 2.5-point favorite. And in Kentucky and Auburn at 6:30 on the SEC Network, Auburn's a 10.5-point favorite. Auburn should win this one. Hugh Freeze said this week on his weekly press conference that there's a quarterback competition between Ashton Daniels and Jackson Arnold. There shouldn't be one. It is pretty cut and dry who should be the quarterback. I think Jackson Arnold will be on the bench. Ashton Daniels will be the starter in this one. And just run Cobb. Just run Jeremiah Cobb, and you should be able to take this one. And we'll see what Cam Coleman's going to do too, health-wise. And I'm just kind of looking around the rest of college football top 25. Penn State and Ohio State. Well, we kind of Ohio State's going to run with that one. I'm intrigued by the Miami SMU game. That should be interesting. Miami's a 12.5-point favorite in that one, but we'll see if they can continue on with their play. Indiana and Maryland. Maryland has not been playing bad this year. Indiana's a 21.5-point favorite in that one. And just kind of looking through, USC, Nebraska should be interesting. USC is a 6.5-point favorite. Both teams have 2 losses. Nebraska and USC 5-2, Nebraska 6-2. So I will probably go with USC in that one. Then Cincinnati and Utah. Cincinnati's playing really good football. I just like Utah. I always will go with Utah. So that should be a fun one. So we got some good games this weekend in college football and in the SEC. It should be all fun. So the pod has gone an hour. Just me running my mouth. I hope you enjoyed this. I will have a college football guest on next week. Trust me. We will not go a solid hour of just me running my mouth. But anyways, please, guys, check out the podcast. Check me on social media. Check out on YouTube and all that good stuff. And we'll see how many people check this out. When I say an hour of just me talking about SEC football. A lot of fun. Anyways, I enjoyed it. I enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fun. I have a passion for talking about this stuff. I have a passion for getting around the microphone talking. And if you're in the Dothan area, please check out the Dothan Wolves on 96.9 Legends Friday. Playing God be the season finale for the Dothan Wolves. No playoffs this year, so it will be our final broadcast this Friday night. So please go check it out and listen to us on the app. All right, everybody. Until next time. Bye-bye.